rich millionaire abandons his poor girlfriend. Years later, he discovers a life-changing secret. The soft hum of the city was barely audible through the thick walls of Jason Moore's penthouse, yet it was always present like a distant heartbeat that echoed through the glass windows, reminding him of the world outside. The view from his apartment was nothing short of spectacular. The sprawling city beneath him seemed to pulse with life, an endless sea of lights and movement, a stark contrast to the emptiness that sometimes crept into his chest. Jason, at 30, had everything most people could ever dream of: wealth, success, recognition. He had built his tech empire from the ground up, each triumph propelling him further into a world where money meant power and power meant influence. His days were filled with meetings, decisions that affected thousands of lives, and a team that looked to him for guidance. But despite all of this, Jason often found himself alone, surrounded by people who spoke the language of success, but didn't understand the quiet loneliness that success brought with it. He stood in front of the large windows now, holding a glass of scotch in one hand, the amber liquid reflecting the lights of the city as it swirled lazily. His eyes, dark and thoughtful, stared out over the skyline, but his mind wasn't focused on the view. It never was anymore. His thoughts always found their way back to Emily Carter. Her name echoed in his mind like a soft whisper, pulling him back to a time before this life, before the constant meetings, the endless business deals, and the hollow smiles of people who wanted something from him. Emily had been different. She had been the girl who didn't care about his success. She had cared about him. She had believed in him when he didn't believe in himself, and for a brief, fleeting moment, Jason had believed he could have both his empire and a love that felt real. But that had been before the decisions, the compromises, and the increasing distance between them. Jason remembered the first time he had met Emily. It had been in a small cafe in the heart of Chesterville, a town far removed from the bright lights of the city where his empire had been born. He had been in town for a quick business trip, staying in a hotel that had been far less luxurious than the ones he was used to, but it didn't matter to him at the time. He had gone out to grab a cup of coffee, the kind of quiet moment he had learned to appreciate, and that was when he had seen her. She was behind the counter, her sleeves rolled up as she wiped down a table, humming softly to herself. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't concerned with how she looked or what others thought of her. She had this warmth about her, a calm presence that made everything around her seem to slow down, just for a moment. When their eyes met, something in Jason had shifted. Emily was everything Jason wasn't, grounded, humble, and filled with the kind of authenticity that Jason hadn't realized he craved until that moment. She didn't care about the things that surrounded him, the expensive cars, the designer suits, the glamorous lifestyle. She cared about people. She cared about the work she did, and that was something Jason found intoxicating. They had spent hours talking, sharing pieces of their lives, and Jason found himself drawn to her in a way he couldn't explain. It was simple, yet deep. There was no pretension between them, no facade. Just two people, in a quiet corner of a small town, connecting over something more than just surface-level conversation. But the time Jason spent with Emily, however meaningful, wasn't enough to stop the inevitable. His business was growing, and with that growth came pressure, more responsibilities, more people who depended on him. Slowly, the long nights in the office stretched longer. He began missing their dates, their quiet dinners. Emily had always understood, always told him she didn't mind the long hours. But Jason knew she wasn't truly okay with it. It was in the way she would smile just a little less brightly when he promised to make time for her. It was in the subtle distance that had grown between them, despite the love they shared. She had never asked for much, but as Jason's world expanded, his attention to her shrank, and the imbalance began to suffocate their relationship. Emily wanted a life with him, not a life of constant sacrifice. One night, after a long day of back-to-back meetings, Jason had arrived at their apartment to find Emily sitting on the couch, her fingers nervously twisting a ring on her finger. The silence between them was thick, almost suffocating, and Jason knew before she even spoke what was coming. "I can't do this anymore, Jason," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I love you, but I can't keep pretending that everything is okay. I'm not happy anymore. I don't know who you are anymore." Jason had tried to explain, to make her see that his work was the reason he had to be away, but his words felt hollow even to him. He was losing her, and there was nothing he could do to fix it. The guilt gnawed at him, but the fear of losing everything he had worked for was stronger. He couldn't just give up on his dreams, could he? "I don't know what you want from me, Emily," he had said, frustration creeping into his voice. "I'm doing this for us, for our future." But she had already made up her mind. "I don't want this future, Jason. Not without you. Not without you here with me." She left that night, taking the small things, clothes, some books, a few photographs. Jason had watched her walk away, feeling like a part of him was being ripped out. Jason's life continued, as did his rise in the business world. His empire flourished, but it was built on compromises, on decisions that left him empty at the end of each long day. The apartment, once filled with laughter and quiet moments with Emily, now echoed with silence. No one asked about his personal life anymore. No one cared. All they saw was the face of the businessman, the successful entrepreneur who could buy anything he wanted. But Jason had learned that money couldn't fill the space left by love. He had tried to forget Emily. He had tried to bury her memory beneath business trips, acquisitions, and new deals, but there were days when it all came rushing back, the way her laugh had sounded, the way she had looked at him when she said she loved him, the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke about her dreams. And in those moments of quiet, Jason had come to realize the truth he had been running from. He had made a mistake. He had let his ambitions blind him to what really mattered. He had let go of the one person who had seen him for who he truly was, not for what he had. It was only when Jason received a text out of the blue from Emily, years after their breakup, that the past came crashing back. "We need to talk." The words were simple, but they stirred something deep inside him, a mixture of fear, hope, and regret. He had thought about her countless times, but he had never imagined that one day she would reach out to him again. What could she possibly want now? What could she say to him after everything? But one thing was certain. Jason knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. He had to face the choices he had made, the life he had abandoned. And now, years later, he had to face the woman who had always believed in him, no matter how much he had failed her. The chapter of their lives that had been torn apart was still unfinished, and for the first time in years, Jason found himself hoping that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for redemption. The message from Emily sat on Jason's phone for hours, an insistent ping every time his screen lit up, reminding him of the past he had tried so hard to leave behind. "We need to talk." Those words haunted him, both comforting and terrifying at the same time. Jason had been busy, as always, running from one meeting to the next, but no amount of business or luxury could block the memory of her. Her laughter, her eyes, the way she had smiled at him like he was the only man in the world who mattered, those memories were carved into his soul. Jason sat at his desk, hands clasped together as he stared at the phone, his thoughts chaotic. He had spent years convincing himself that moving on from Emily had been the right decision, that his success, his empire, would be enough to fill the hollow space inside him. But in reality, no amount of money or achievement had ever erased her from his mind. With a deep breath, Jason finally swiped the screen, his fingers trembling ever so slightly. He hesitated before typing a simple reply. "When and where?" Her response came almost immediately. "Tomorrow, 6 p.m., the same cafe, the same cafe." Jason felt a tightness in his chest as the memory of that little cafe in Chesterville flooded back. The place where it had all started, the scent of coffee in the air, the way her eyes sparkled when they first met. How easy it had been to talk to her, like they had known each other forever. He had walked away from that world, convinced he was doing the right thing. And now, years later, he was walking right back into it. Jason arrived in Chesterville earlier than expected, his luxury car parked on the edge of the small town, far away from the quaint streets and bustling businesses. He had seen this place many times in his memories, its simplicity, its charm, its lack of pretension. He had driven away from it years ago, leaving Emily behind, and now as he stepped out of the car, the weight of that decision felt more like a burden than ever. The cafe stood just as it had in his memories, a small, unassuming building nestled between two other shops. The weathered sign above the door still read, Chesterville Cafe. Jason hadn't realized how much he had missed this place, how much he had missed the comfort of its warmth, its simplicity. He had been so wrapped up in his ambition, so consumed by the relentless pursuit of success, that he hadn't allowed himself to stop and appreciate the little things. Walking inside, he was greeted by the familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee and the hum of quiet conversation. The tables were mostly empty at this time of day, save for a few patrons sipping their drinks, lost in their own thoughts. Jason stood there for a moment, surveying the space, his heart pounding in his chest. He hadn't expected the anxiety, the nervousness, but here, in this place, surrounded by memories, it felt like time had stood still. His eyes scanned the room, searching for her, and then he saw her. Emily was sitting at a corner table, just as she had all those years ago when they first met. Her back was to the door, her dark hair cascading down her shoulders in soft waves, and she was reading a book, her brow furrowed in concentration. The light from the window illuminated her face, and for a moment Jason forgot how to breathe. She hadn't changed much. There were lines now around her eyes, evidence of the life she had lived without him, but the essence of the woman he had loved was still there. She was still Emily Strong, beautiful, quiet in her strength. Jason's steps were hesitant, but he walked toward her anyway. He was nervous, unsure of how to approach her after all this time. What would she say? Would she still look at him the same way? Would she even want to see him? When she heard him approach, Emily looked up from her book, her eyes narrowing for a split second as she registered his presence. The flicker of recognition was there, but it was quickly replaced by something more guarded. She put the book down slowly, her fingers lingering on the cover before she met his gaze fully. "Jason," she said, her voice steady but laced with a subtle edge that betrayed the emotions she was trying to control. "Emily," Jason replied, his voice quiet, almost unsure. He stood a few feet from her, not wanting to crowd her space, but also unsure of how to bridge the distance that had grown between them. There was an awkward silence between them, the years of separation hanging in the air like a cloud. Jason could feel the weight of it pressing down on him, making his words come out slower, more deliberate. "I didn't expect you to reach out," he said, his voice faltering just slightly. "But I'm glad you did." Emily studied him for a moment, her eyes searching his face as if trying to read the truth behind his carefully composed exterior. "I didn't expect it either," she said finally, her voice colder than he had remembered. "But I thought we deserved a chance to talk." Jason nodded, stepping back slightly as he took the seat opposite her. He noticed that her hands were trembling ever so slightly, but she hid it well. She had always been so strong, so composed, even when she had every right to break. He had no idea where to begin. The last time they had spoken, he had walked away, leaving her heartbroken, and now, here they were, reunited under strange and painful circumstances. He had hurt her. That much was undeniable, but how could he make up for it? "Emily, I've missed you," Jason said quietly, his voice thick with regret. "I know I hurt you, and I don't know how to fix it, but I want to try. I want to make things right." Emily's gaze softened for a moment, but she quickly masked it with a more neutral expression. "You can't fix everything, Jason. Some things don't go back to the way they were. You can't just come in and expect everything to be okay again." Jason felt his chest tighten at her words. He had known this wasn't going to be easy, but hearing her say it so plainly cut deeper than he had imagined. "I know I can't fix everything," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm here. I'm ready to listen, to understand, whatever you need." Emily met his gaze, her eyes unwavering. "And what do you want from me, Jason? After everything?" Jason hesitated, the words caught in his throat. He wanted to tell her that he wanted her back, that he regretted everything, but it wasn't that simple. "I don't know what I expect," he said finally, his voice almost vulnerable. I don't want to live with the guilt of not trying. I never should have walked away from you. I was selfish, and I see that now." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and emotions that neither had fully dealt with. Emily finally took a deep breath, her eyes softening as she looked at him. "Maybe it's too late for us, Jason," she said quietly. "Maybe we've both changed too much." Jason's heart sank at her words, but there was a part of him, a stubborn, hopeful part, that refused to believe it. He had hurt her, yes, but if there was even a chance to make things right, he wasn't going to let it slip away. The silence between Jason and Emily was a palpable thing, lingering in the space between them like an old wound that had never truly healed. Jason could feel it, heavy and suffocating, as if their entire history together was pressing down on him. He didn't know what to say. He had hoped for an easy conversation, a way to slip back into the connection they once had, but reality wasn't kind. Emily had always been the grounded one, the one who seemed to see things clearly even in the midst of chaos. But now, as she sat across from him, he noticed a coldness in her eyes, a wariness he hadn't seen before. It was as if she was protecting herself from him, and rightly so. He had walked away from her once. He had chosen his ambition over her, and there was no undoing that. No matter how much he wanted to, he couldn't just erase the past. "Emily," he started, his voice barely above a whisper, "I know that I hurt you. I've spent years thinking about it, trying to make sense of what I did. I was so consumed by what I thought I needed, what I thought would make me happy, that I didn't see what I was losing. What I lost was you." He paused, searching her face for some sign that she was hearing him, that his words were sinking in. "I'm not the same person I was back then. I'm not asking you to forgive me right now, but I'm asking you for the chance to show you that I've changed." Emily's gaze flickered away from his, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her coffee cup. It was small, but Jason saw it the way she pulled herself inward, as if bracing for something he couldn't see. He hadn't been the one to protect her when she needed him most, and now he couldn't help but feel like an intruder in her life. "You talk about change, Jason," Emily said, her voice low but firm, "but can you really change? People don't change overnight. I'm not sure you even understand the weight of what you left behind. You didn't just walk away from me, Jason. You walked away from the life we could have had, our future. I don't know if you can ever understand that." Jason swallowed hard, his chest tightening as the words hit him with an unexpected force. He had always believed that if he worked hard enough, if he achieved enough, he would find happiness. But Emily was right. He had never truly understood what it meant to build a future with someone. He had built his empire on the backs of others, but he hadn't known how to build a life with the person who mattered most. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect things to go back to the way they were," Jason said, his voice strained. "But I want you to know that I never stopped thinking about you. I never stopped regretting the way I left. I didn't know what I had until it was gone." For a long moment, Emily didn't respond. The tension between them felt like a thick fog, swirling around them, making everything feel uncertain. Jason could see the way her lips pressed together, as if she were fighting to hold back something bigger than the words they were exchanging. Finally, Emily took a deep breath, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of vulnerability and resolve. "You never understood, Jason. You never understood what I went through after you left. What it was like to go through the motions of life, pretending that everything was okay, while the reality was crushing me." She paused, her gaze softening, but her voice hardening. "You weren't the only one who was hurt by what happened. You weren't the only one who suffered. Jason felt his stomach drop. He had expected anger. He had expected pain, but this level of raw emotion caught him off guard. The weight of her words settled over him like a heavy blanket, and he could feel the guilt knotting in his chest. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "What happened to you, Emily?" "I didn't." "Don't you dare pretend you didn't know." She cut him off, her voice rising for the first time, the tension in her shoulders obvious. "You think I didn't feel abandoned? You think I didn't feel like you just tossed me aside as if I were nothing? I didn't just lose you, Jason. I lost myself. I spent years picking up the pieces of my life, trying to move on, trying to survive without the one person I thought I could rely on." Jason opened his mouth to speak, but Emily held up her hand, stopping him. "I'm not done." Her eyes burned with intensity, but there was something else in them, something he hadn't seen before. "I spent years trying to make sense of what happened, and then, a year after you left, I found out I was pregnant." Jason's breath caught in his throat. The world seemed to stop for a second as her words hit him like a punch. His mind raced, trying to process what she was saying, but the reality of it was too much to take in all at once. "You were pregnant." His voice was barely above a whisper, a mix of shock and disbelief. Emily nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving his. "Yes, but I couldn't keep the child from you. I couldn't bring a child into this world, knowing that you didn't want us. I didn't want to burden you, Jason. I didn't want to be that woman, the one who trapped a man into a life he didn't want." Jason's entire world seemed to shift. All this time, he had thought that Emily had simply moved on, that she had found a way to live without him. But she had carried this life, this secret by herself all these years. And now, hearing her say it out loud, hearing the pain in her voice, made him realize how little he had truly known her, how little he had known himself. "I never knew," Jason whispered, his voice shaking. "I never knew you were carrying my child, Emily. Why didn't you tell me?" "I couldn't," she replied, her voice breaking for the first time. "I couldn't tell you because I knew you would feel obligated. I didn't want that. I wanted you to choose me, to choose us." Jason's mind was spinning. He felt the weight of the decision Emily had made, the sacrifice she had made, and it crushed him. She had carried this burden alone for so long, and he hadn't even known. For the first time, Jason felt the weight of everything he had lost, not just Emily, but the life that could have been, the future he had so casually discarded for the sake of his career, for the sake of his ambition. Jason's hands trembled as he reached across the table, but Emily pulled away before he could touch her. She wasn't ready for his comfort. Not yet. Jason understood he had no right to ask for it. "You left me, Jason," Emily said softly, her voice low but filled with an unspoken finality. "You walked away from me, and you walked away from our child. And no matter how much you regret it now, it doesn't change what you did. It doesn't change the fact that I did it alone." The tears that Jason had been holding back finally slipped down his cheeks, his heart breaking as he saw the woman he once loved, still loved, broken in front of him. He had been selfish. He had been blind to what really mattered. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice raw with emotion. "I can't undo what I've done, but I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. I swear it. I'll do anything to make it up to you and to our child." Emily stood up, her movement slow and deliberate. "It's too late for that now, Jason. Too much has changed, and I've changed too. You can't just come back into my life and expect things to be the same." Jason watched her, his heart aching with the truth in her words. He knew it too. He knew that he couldn't simply walk back into her life, expecting forgiveness, expecting her to pick up where they left off. But one thing was certain. He would spend the rest of his life trying to make up for what he had lost. Jason didn't leave the cafe immediately. He sat there, staring at the empty cup in front of him, the cold remnants of coffee now just a bitter reminder of everything that had just been revealed. Emily's words echoed in his mind, replaying over and over like a haunting refrain. "You left me. You left our child." The weight of those words pressed down on him, heavier than any business deal, any success he had ever achieved. It felt like a mirror had been held up to his life, reflecting not just his past mistakes, but the fractured pieces of the future he could never reclaim. He hadn't expected the revelation of Emily's pregnancy. How could he? After all, he had left her behind, never giving her a chance to tell him what had really happened. All these years, he had imagined that she had moved on, that her life was filled with the kind of peace and simplicity that he had abandoned. But now, it was clear how deeply he had wounded her, how completely he had shut himself off from the reality of what she had endured. Jason's thoughts were interrupted when he saw Emily standing near the door, her jacket pulled tightly around her as she prepared to leave. She had kept her distance after the conversation, keeping a cold but steady composure that matched the walls she had carefully built around herself. Jason stood up quickly, his heart racing as he moved toward her, his feet almost moving without his consent. He wasn't sure what he was trying to do. Apologize again, beg her to let him in. He was lost in the tumult of emotions swirling inside him. "Emily, wait," Jason called out softly, but his voice was unsteady, almost a plea. She froze for a moment, her back still turned to him. Jason could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands fidgeted with the strap of her bag. She didn't turn around immediately, as though she needed a moment to gather herself, to decide if facing him once more was something she was willing to do. Finally, she turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. They were still filled with that guarded strength, the kind of strength that Jason had always admired in her, but now it was tinged with something else, something that felt like resignation. "What do you want, Jason?" she asked quietly, her voice measured, but the underlying pain was clear. "What can you possibly say to make this any better?" Jason's throat tightened, the weight of her question sinking in like a stone in his chest. He opened his mouth, but the words didn't come. What could he say? "I'm sorry. I didn't know." They all felt hollow, empty in comparison to the gravity of her experience. "I don't know what to say," he whispered, his voice breaking as the emotion built up in his chest. I want to make it right. I know I can't change the past, but I can't just walk away from this again. I can't walk away from you, from our child." Emily's eyes softened for just a moment, but there was no forgiveness in them. Not yet. "Jason," she said softly but firmly, "you can't just come back and expect everything to be the way it was. This isn't a fairy tale. Life isn't a second chance just because you've decided you've learned your lesson." Her words struck him like a slap. He wanted to argue, to convince her that he had changed, that he understood now, that he was ready to be a part of their life. But he couldn't. He knew she was right. He had never truly understood the consequences of his actions until now. "I never thought I would be in this situation," Jason said, his voice shaking slightly. "I never thought I would. I didn't even know about the child. I had no idea what you went through. And now all I want is to be there for you, for our child." Emily's expression hardened again, the walls rising higher between them. "You think that's enough? That you can just waltz in and be a father?" "It doesn't work like that, Jason. You walked away from us. You made a choice." The anger was starting to slip into her voice now, a mixture of hurt and frustration that she had kept buried for so long. Jason could see it. She had built up a lifetime of pain, a reservoir of emotions that she had never let him see, and now they were coming to the surface. "I know it doesn't work like that," Jason replied, his voice low and sincere. "I can't fix it with a few words, I know that. But I need you to know that I want to try. I want to be there for both of you, even if it means making things harder for myself." Emily's lips trembled, and for a moment Jason thought she might break down right there in front of him. But she didn't. She kept herself composed, her gaze never leaving his. "Trying isn't enough," she said, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "You left, Jason. You left me with nothing but a broken heart and a baby to raise. You made your choice, and I made mine." Jason's chest constricted at her words. She was right. He had chosen his ambition, his career, and left her to pick up the pieces. There was no undoing that. There was no magic fix. He had missed everything. He had missed the first steps, the first words, the first milestones, and now he was being asked to fit into a life that had been lived without him. "I know I can't make it better," Jason said, his voice rough, "but I want to be a part of your life. I want to help. I know I can never replace the time I lost, but I can be here now." Emily sighed, the tension in her body visible as she rubbed her temple. "It's not that simple, Jason. You think I'm going to let you back into my life just because you feel guilty? You think that's all it takes? I've spent so long rebuilding my life without you, without needing you. I don't need you to feel bad. I don't need you to come in and fix everything." Jason's heart dropped as he took in her words. The walls had gone up, higher than before, and he realized just how deep the hurt went. He had wanted to make amends, to prove that he could be the man she had once believed he could be. But now he saw the truth. He had a long way to go, and it wasn't going to be easy. The damage he had done wasn't something that could be erased in a single conversation, no matter how much he wished it could. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Jason said quietly, "but I'm asking for the chance to prove that I can be there, for you, for our child. Not because I'm trying to fix my guilt, but because I want to be the man you thought I was, and the father our child deserves." For a long moment, Emily said nothing. Her gaze remained steady, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer but still firm. "You can't undo what's been done, but I'm not saying you don't have a chance. You've got a long way to go, Jason, and I'm not sure I'm ready to let you in yet." Jason nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle over him. It wasn't the answer he had hoped for, but it was the answer he needed. "I'll wait," he said quietly. "I'll wait as long as it takes." The days that followed were filled with a quiet kind of tension. Jason returned to his life in the city, but the weight of his unresolved conversation with Emily followed him everywhere. His days were filled with meetings, the hum of business calls, and the same endless rhythm of wealth and success, but nothing felt the same. He felt disconnected, restless in a way that he hadn't experienced before. The achievements, the accolades, the extravagant dinners, all of it seemed hollow now. Nothing could fill the void that had opened up when he'd walked away from Emily, and nothing seemed to quiet the gnawing guilt that clung to him like a second skin. Jason spent his evenings staring at the skyline from his penthouse apartment, the world sprawling before him, yet nothing about it felt as important as the moments he had lost. What had I been running from? He asked himself. The ambition, the rush of success, he had chased it all, but now, as he stood on the precipice of something real, something he had once believed he would never deserve, he couldn't help but wonder if it had all been in vain. Emily had made it clear that things couldn't go back to the way they were. Her walls were up, and Jason knew he had no right to tear them down. She had been through so much on her own, raising their child without him, enduring the silence of his absence, and Jason could see how deeply it had affected her. There was no way to simply undo that. But she hadn't closed the door entirely. Her words, though guarded, still left room for him to show her that he could change, that he could be more than the man he had been, the man who had put his ambitions before her, who had let her slip away because he didn't know how to balance it all. Jason's first move was subtle. He didn't try to rush back into her life. He sent texts, brief, thoughtful ones, just to check in, just to let her know that he was thinking of her and the child. He had no expectation of a response, but each time he heard from her, his heart lifted, if only for a moment. Then, after a few weeks, he decided to visit Chesterville again. This time he didn't just show up for a casual meeting. He needed to prove that he was serious. He knew he couldn't fix everything with grand gestures, but he hoped that his sincerity would show through in the little things. He wasn't going to force Emily into anything, but he was going to be there. As he walked into the familiar cafe again, the scent of coffee and the hum of soft conversation surrounding him, Jason felt a strange mixture of anticipation and nervousness. Would she even want to see him, Would it all just feel like too much too soon? He had no idea. When Emily arrived, she was alone as usual. Her face was soft, a little tired from the weight of motherhood, but there was something about her that still felt like the Emily he had once known. The woman who had laughed with him in this very cafe, who had shared her hopes and dreams without reservation. She had changed, yes, but Jason couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope as their eyes met across the room. Her presence still had the same effect on him, pulling him in, making everything else fade into the background. Emily walked toward him, her expression unreadable. She stopped just short of the table, not sitting down immediately, but giving him space. Her eyes were cautious, her hands folded in front of her, but there was a softness to her posture that he hadn't seen before. She hadn't pushed him away completely. Not yet. "Hey," Jason said quietly, a little surprised by the rawness of his own voice. "Thanks for meeting me. I know you didn't have to." Emily's gaze flickered briefly before she nodded. "I didn't know what else to do. I've been thinking a lot and I realized I need to hear you out. I need to know if you really mean what you're saying." Jason felt a lump form in his throat. He had so much to prove, and he wasn't sure where to start. But he knew one thing. He couldn't lose her again. "I'm not asking for anything, Emily," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not asking you to let me back in. I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'm ready to do whatever it takes to prove to you that I can be someone you can rely on, someone who won't let you down." Emily studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face as if trying to find the sincerity that had been absent before. Finally she sat down, her body still tense, but she seemed to relax just enough for Jason to believe she was willing to listen. "You're right," Emily said, her voice softer than it had been before. "You can't just undo what's been done, but I'm tired of pretending that I don't care, that I don't want things to be different." Jason's heart raced at her words. Was she saying what he thought she was saying? Was there hope? "Emily." His voice trailed off as he searched for the right words. "I know I can't make up for everything, but I want to try. I want to be there for you, for our child. I want to make the right choices this time. I don't want to be the man who walked away from everything he could have had. I want to be the man who chooses to stay, to be part of something real." Emily looked away briefly, as if trying to compose herself, before she spoke again. "It's not going to be easy, Jason. You can't just walk back in and act like we can pick up where we left off. There's so much that's changed. And there's so much I've done on my own. I've had to be both mother and father to our child. I've learned to rely on myself." Jason swallowed hard, understanding the weight of her words. He had been absent, but she hadn't just survived, she had thrived. She had done everything on her own, and the thought of him trying to fit back into her life felt overwhelming. But Emily's words, though guarded, weren't shutting him out. She was giving him a chance, however small, to prove that he could be part of their future. "I'm not asking for everything," Jason said quietly. "I just want a chance to be there, to be part of your life and our child's life. I don't want to rush things, but I want to show you that I'm here for the long haul." The silence between them felt thick, but it wasn't oppressive. It was a silence that held the promise of something more, of something that could grow, something that might just be worth the effort. Emily's gaze softened for the first time in a long while. "You've got a lot to prove, Jason, but I'm willing to listen, and maybe, just maybe, I'll give you the chance to show me." Jason nodded, relief flooding through him like a wave, but he knew this was just the beginning. He had years of mistakes to make up for, and he couldn't expect anything to change overnight. But for the first time in a long time, he believed that change was possible. As they parted ways that evening, Jason felt the weight of the road ahead. He wasn't going to be able to erase the hurt, the years lost, but he could start by proving that he was willing to stay. He didn't know where this path would lead, but for the first time in years, he was ready to take it, step by cautious step. He had found something in Emily's forgiveness and in the hope of what could be that he hadn't even realized he was looking for, a chance to rebuild, to change. and for the first time he didn't mind that it wasn't going to be easy. The weeks after their conversation in the cafe were slow, marked by moments of hesitation and subtle breakthroughs. Jason wasn't sure how to navigate this new dynamic between him and Emily. He was still unsure of what he could offer, still unsure of what he expected in return, but one thing was clear: he wasn't going anywhere. He had found himself back in Chesterville, visiting more often than he had ever imagined he would, each visit a quiet promise to himself. Each visit he made to see Emily, to spend time with their child, was like a small, tentative step toward a future that seemed both impossible and necessary. Jason didn't know how things would end, but he knew he had to try. Every day he fought the temptation to rush in, to demand answers and resolutions. He knew that healing took time, and more than anything, Emily needed the space to heal on her own terms. She had raised their child alone, carried that secret for so long, and Jason knew that she had built walls around her heart. But the walls were beginning to show cracks, and Jason could see it. Every small interaction, every cautious conversation was a step in the right direction. Emily, too, was learning to navigate this new reality. She had spent years pretending that she didn't care, that the hurt Jason had caused her didn't matter, but the truth was much more complicated. She had never stopped loving him. That had always been the hardest part, knowing that she had given up on him, but still feeling the sting of longing for what could have been. She had built a life without him, a life where she had learned to rely on herself and no one else. Her child, now a young toddler with Jason's eyes, was her greatest joy, but also the most painful reminder of what she had lost. Every day was a balancing act, wanting to protect her child from the past, from the mistakes she and Jason had made, but also allowing herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild something. But trusting him again, allowing him back into their lives, was no simple task. She was afraid of getting hurt again, of hoping too much and being let down once more. The scars of the past were deep, and every time Jason showed up, every time he spoke of wanting to make things right, Emily couldn't help but question whether he truly understood what it would take. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that he could be the man she had always seen in him. But she had learned that believing in someone meant risking the pain of disappointment, and that was a risk she wasn't sure she was ready to take. One afternoon, as Emily was sorting through her mail at home, she found a letter addressed to her in a familiar handwriting. It was from Jason. Her heart skipped a beat as she opened it, the paper trembling slightly in her hands. In the letter, Jason wrote, "Emily, I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. I know I can't undo the past, but I will spend the rest of my life trying to prove that I am the man who deserves a place in yours and our child's life. I know I've made mistakes, unforgivable ones, but I want to be there for you. Not because I think I owe you anything, but because I've learned that the one thing I never had was you. I don't know what the future holds, but I want to be a part of it, if you'll let me." She held the letter in her hands, staring at the words as the reality of what he was saying sank in. Jason had never been good with words, but these words were different. They were raw, vulnerable. They showed the man he had become, the man he was trying to be. Emily couldn't deny the truth in his letter. There was no pretense, no excuses, just a man who was willing to lay everything bare to try and make things right. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to cry. Not tears of anger or bitterness, but tears of hope. She didn't know if she could forgive him yet. She didn't know if she could ever forget the hurt of the past. But for the first time, Emily allowed herself to consider the possibility of a future with him in it. The following days were quiet, as if the universe was giving them the space to breathe, to think. Jason and Emily didn't rush into anything. They spent more time together, but it was never forced. Their conversations were slow, deliberate, almost as if they were both afraid of shattering the delicate peace they had started to build. Jason took things one step at a time, always careful not to push too hard. He spent hours with Emily's child, getting to know the little person who had been born without him. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when he felt completely out of place, when the weight of the years he had missed seemed too heavy to bear. But with each passing day, he felt himself growing closer to them both. Emily, too, was learning to let go of the walls she had built. She didn't trust easily, but she could see the effort Jason was putting in. Slowly, she began to realize that maybe, just maybe, he was truly trying to be the man he had once promised to be. She saw how patient he was, how much he had changed, and with every small gesture her heart softened just a little bit more. One evening, as they sat together on her porch, watching the sunset, Emily turned to Jason, her expression more serious than it had been in a long time. "Jason," she began, her voice quiet but steady, "you've done everything right so far. You've been patient, and I've seen the change in you. But there's one thing you need to understand. It's not just about us. It's about our child. You can't just come back into our lives and expect everything to be easy. You're not just rebuilding a relationship with me. You're rebuilding trust with someone who's never known you." Jason nodded solemnly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I understand. I'll prove to both of you that I'm here to stay. I'll be the father our child deserves, and I'll be the partner you need. I'm not asking for everything, Emily. I'm just asking for a chance to be part of your life again." Emily studied him for a long moment, and for the first time she didn't see the man who had hurt her. She saw the man who had changed, who had learned from his mistakes. She saw the man who was willing to fight for her, for their family. Finally, she nodded. "All right, Jason, I'm willing to give you that chance. But it's not going to be easy. It'll take time." Jason's heart leapt in his chest. "I'll wait as long as it takes." Emily's lips curled into a small, tentative smile. "We'll take it slow, but we'll take it together." As the weeks turned into months, things slowly began to fall into place. The rebuilding wasn't without its challenges. There were moments of doubt, moments where Jason questioned if he was really enough. But he kept going, determined to prove that he could be the man Emily deserved. And Emily, though cautious, began to trust him again, not just with her heart, but with the child who had become her whole world. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Jason and Emily found themselves starting something new, something built not on the mistakes of the past, but on the promise of a better future. They didn't know where the road would lead, but for the first time in years, they were walking it together. And that, Jason realized, was all he had ever needed. Redemption isn't about erasing the past, it's about building a future that honors the lessons learned. For Jason, the journey to rebuild trust with Emily and step into his role as a father wasn't easy, but it was worth every struggle. As the walls between them slowly crumbled, they began to rediscover the connection they once had, stronger and more resilient than before. This story reminds us that mistakes don't have to define us. What matters is the effort we make to mend what's broken and prove through actions, not just words, that love and family are worth fighting for. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt tales that explore life, love, and redemption. Let us know in the comments what resonated with you most, and stay tuned for our next story, because sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead to the most beautiful destinations. Thank you for watching.